Hey, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, April 22nd, and this is session B of the BCDC Design Subcommittee. The Planning Department continues hosting public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. My name is Seth Reisman, Deputy Director of Design Review at the City of Boston Planning Department. And before we proceed with the agenda, the open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. For the record, commissioners present include Commissioner Gilly Smith, Commissioner Love, Commissioner Ron, and Commissioner Sykes. Tonight's agenda will include a presentation or multiple presentations. It's actually a double header for the proposed project at One Joslin Place in the Longwood Medical area. And tonight's meetings will follow, tonight's meetings proceedings will begin with a brief presentation from the proponent focused on pedestrian connections, followed by comments from commissioners. Then the proponent will give a second presentation focused on building articulation, followed by comments from the commissioners, followed by public testimony and next steps. So a proposed project at this location contemplates the development of 495,000 square feet of hospital use and 250 garage parking spaces in a single building on an approximately 1 acre site in accordance with the approved 10-year institutional master plans for Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. This will be the fourth presentation of the 80B application for this proposed project to the Design Subcommittee, following an introduction at the December 3rd monthly meeting and subsequent Design Subcommittee meetings on January 21st, March 18th, and April 15th. The Commission previously reviewed the approved IMPs for both institutions, which set forth the regulatory context for the proposed project. The most recent Design Subcommittee meeting focused on the proposed reconfiguration of adjacent public rights-of-way and Joslin Park. This Design Subcommittee will focus on updates to the proposed pedestrian bridges and architectural expression. A reminder to proponent teams that presentations will be limited to 15 minutes. We will give you a halftime and 1 minute warning. And with that, I invite the proponent team to begin the first presentation whenever ready. And commissioners, we will sort of roughly time about a 45-minute discussion period on the first presentation, and then suggest to see whether we are ready for the second presentation after that. Okay. Believe the proponent teams have been elevated.
Yes, we
Michael,
are. Thank you, Seth.
Are you there?
Yes, we are.
Great.
Good evening. Well, Seth, thank you very much for that introduction. And good evening to the commissioners. Thank you for joining us this evening to discuss the pedestrian connectors. As Seth said earlier, I'm Michael Hinchcliffe, principal in charge of the project. Good to see you all again. We'll be covering two topics this evening. The first will be the hospital connectors, and then the second will be the overall building design. So to jump right into it, this is a view from Pilgrim Road, looking at Joslin Park, which we discussed last week. The Pilgrim Road connector is on our left-hand side. It's what we'll be talking about first this evening. To remind you, the Pilgrim Connector is that vital link that joins the Future Cancer Hospital to advanced clinical services and specialties on the Beth Israel Deaconess West Campus. So that's the emergency room, the arrival of patients by ambulance, the advanced imaging surgical operating rooms. It's a critical link for the operation of the hospital to the rest of the medical campus. It's navigating about 3'6" in elevation change between the two buildings. And we were challenged at our previous meetings to look really carefully at this connector, both from an urbanistic standpoint, but also from an architectural standpoint, how we articulate the depth of the overhang, alternate configurations for the crossing. How is this becoming a building unto itself and being respectful of its surroundings? Are there alternate materials or massings or approaches? And what's, moreover, the pedestrian experience from the urban realm? So I'd like Kevin to take us through the progression that we've had since we last met with you.
Thank you, Michael. So what I wanted to do first is just start off where we left off last time. And this array of schemes on the left shows you where we were the last time we presented to you. And in this scheme, the connector was very much a connector, very light, transparent volume. And subsequently, we've worked on some schemes that have tried to embrace the park and the landscape in several different ways. The progress scheme that when we were working with the BPDA on 226, we were trying to integrate landscape with the connector, and you'll see that in the form of sort of a linear planter at the top and the walking surface elevation of the connector. And then our current proposal, which is a bit of a departure, and it's almost a building that anchors the end of the part that's very much an extension of the landscape itself. And so it has a very different tone and texture. And the more transparent connectors that are very much analogous to the Brookline connector actually go to the FAR building on one side and the new cancer hospital on the other. And this axon shows this idea where the landscape really becomes an extension of the connector. And we've actually widened that planter strip in front of the building to actually have a more robust landscape connection. Now, as we look at the connector in a little more detail, you'll notice it's made up of three different segments. The A segment, which spans essentially from canopy to canopy on the new cancer hospital and to the Rosenberg canopy on one side of the building. And then it has connector type B, which are these lighter, more ephemeral connectors. They're analogous to the Brookline connector. Now, as we look at the architecture, this is a view from Deaconess. You see the edge of the Rosenberg canopy on the left. This weathering steel building, very much of the landscape, the tone and the texture. You'll notice actually that there's a row of trees in front of the building. This was actually to use the landscape almost to define that rhythm of loggia that's in front of the building as well. As we move a little more towards the park with the next view, you'll see how it nestles into the landscape. Michael, I'm not seeing it move. Oh, I'm sorry. And so this is also just giving you a sense of, we were thinking very much how the building responds to the different times of the year, and we wanted it to have that earthy tone, whether or not it's part of the season where there are leaves on the trees or not. So this is a view from the center of the park. You'll see the shading strategy opens up as you get to the center, and then it closes down when you get to the edges. So it's quite dynamic. And the next view is going to give you a sense of what it's like up along the new cancer hospital. So you'll see the canopy of the new cancer hospital. And the Deaconess building's very much in the background here. We're using some planting on the top of the building to help screen the very top of the parapet of the Deaconess building, and some additional landscape along the base of the building too, to buffer it from the street, but also extend that landscape from the park to the other side of the street. So if you could go to the next view, Michael. This is a view of what we're referring to as the loggia. There's different planes in this walk. We lessened the cantilever quite a bit so that it's not quite as pronounced as it was. On this end of the loggia, there's plenty of room for seating up along the wall there. The wall steps as you get to the end, and then you have this robust planting strip bookending the end of the park there. So I wanted to take us through just a couple dimensional things to give you a sense. So these are some precedent planning strategies that we've talked about in the past. And Chris from MVVA in Q&A can go into more detail if you have some questions about these things. This is our overall approach for the planting on the top of the building. So there are some non-deciduous plants both at the bottom and the top, as you can see here. And then on the next series of drawings, you can see how this works in plan. So this is a plan view at the level of the connector. And you can see that the armature that's sort of framing the building fronting the park actually tapers to allow room for these trees in the front. And then as we look at the ground level and the roof level, you'll see some of the planting strategies. So this next view is going to show you sort of the planting bed at the street. And you'll see there's this 5.5-foot planter with the trees aligning the sidewalk and this sort of stepped wall along the back of the connector. So what we're doing here is we've actually reduced the width of the street by 2.5 feet to give us this more robust planting zone in front of the connector. Now, as we look at the top of the building, on the roof of this too, there is a planting bed that's at the top of the building that gives it sort of this essence of the planting sort of screening the building behind, but also draping over the facade and some strategic locations. So what we wanted to do now is take a step and start to look at some of the sections. So these sections show the relationship at the base of the building. You have that roughly 6-foot planter up against Pilgrim, a walkway that varies in width, but at no point is it narrower than 8 feet. And then you'll see the clearance, the roadway clearance that we're trying to do below the Pilgrim connector that's going back to the new cancer hospital. Now, we wanted to show you some details of the sections to give you some more details. So Michael, if you could just advance it.
And Kevin, you're about halftime.
Okay. So this is showing a view you haven't seen. You're sort of looking at New Cancer Hospital on the left, the Pilgrim connector on the right, this tapered site wall and some of the planting. And then Michael, if you can quickly cycle through this next view, it's a little further down. Pilgrim up against the New Cancer Hospital, sort of beyond the angled connection to the connector. And then these next views quickly just show some section studies. And the ideas of the component B, the lighter connectors, are very much like what we're proposing for the Brookline connector. And then this next slide just shows you these two different conditions of type A and type B, type A anchoring the end of the park and type B connecting to both the FAR building and the New Cancer Hospital. Michael, you can advance it and take it home.
Thanks very much, Kevin. So there were some questions raised about the routing of the connectors, more particularly the angled connector over Pilgrim Road, connecting it from the section along the Deaconess building to the future cancer hospital. We've looked at a number of different variants on this pathway. We looked at routing it through the building. We looked at moving staircases within the future cancer hospital. We looked at the structure as well as the abutting buildings and uses. And in the end, we've resolved that we feel that with the most efficient structure, with the least impact on existing programs, and with an overlay of the best pathway for safe patient transport, that our proposed angled connector between the FAR building and the future cancer hospital really seems to make the most sense, not only from an elegant crossing urbanistically, but also one that solves multiple problems and challenges on the inside of the building for patients, for structure, for efficiency, and for existing programs, most notably an inpatient psychiatric unit that's located on the top floor of Deaconess. What we'd like to do now is transition to the other connector that we'll talk about, which is the Brookline connector. As Kevin said earlier, the bridge portion of the Pilgrim connector is meant to be a variant or a close sibling of this other connector that spans across Brookline Avenue. So let's go over there right now. When we last presented it, we heard from you very clearly that we needed to carefully consider the transparency and glazing and proportion of this connector to really look at the lighting and the soffit conditions, as well as a priority for this to be as elegantly detailed as possible, as well as resolving the interior of the connector. So let's look at this in more detail. When we step back from the city, let's move in now. You'll recall at the center of the screen is the multi-height lobby space that the bridge enters into, the bridge on the right. We looked at and shared some of these images of study models that we've developed to really carefully assess how the connector works separately and in conjunction with the building, and how it meets the adjoining structure across the street at the Dana building. So in this view here, we're looking outbound on Brookline Avenue, different than Pilgrim Road connector, which is a little bit lower. Here we're almost 30 feet above grade, with a light and delicate span that is bridging across the street. In the outbound view here, a little bit closer in, we're spanning the roadway with a pair of box trusses underneath, when we've worked over the past few weeks to lighten how the connector meets the sky, as well as to try and thin up as many profiles. As a reminder, we are at the third floor here, so connecting a series of patient movements for ambulatory patients or outpatients that are moving into the cancer hospital at the third floor. Those are still under study, as well as how it elegantly connects into the vertical circulation and arrival system in the new cancer hospital. In this sequence here where we started, we were a little bit heavier and a little bit maybe more conservative in our approach to the structure. Since then, we've evolved to look at refining again and how the connector meets the sky with a glazed corner. We've tried to lighten the structure below and introduce the idea of a flyby, so a little bit more transparency and lightness at the base of the connector. It's relatively narrow and shallow. So about 15 feet high, lower than it was before, and about 12'3" wide. We're working closely with our engineers, Lemessurier, again, to look at how light and elegant we can make this. So with all the structure below, we're bearing the roof on a series of very slender tube steel columns with no mullions for the glass. So we're aiming to get the highest transparency for this triple glazed structure. We are meeting all the new energy codes. So as a patient transfer route, this is a fully conditioned route that will provide no interruption in the quality of the environment or care. So the insulative value of the glazing and the careful consideration of frit patterns and bird frit protection on here has been at the forefront as we've evolved the design here of the connector. We have begun to look at the coloration, and in this outbound view, this is something that we're now wanting to study in close coordination with not only the future cancer hospital, trims and architecture, but also the adjoining Dana and Mayer building. Here we're tested a range of colors. We think that in the slightly lighter, cooler shade might make more sense for integrating the two structures and the crossing. But in the end, we are looking at multiple options in the field and in true daylight. In these final views here, we are looking at how the connector meets the Dana and Mayer building. We are restricting our work here to one structural bay, so we do have to do some structural work to receive the new connector, but it aligns now with a staff entry to the Dana building that we will clad below it with terracotta panels that evoke and tie through some of those key lines in the existing building adjacent.
And Michael, about a minute left.
Perfect timing. So looking then at how the connector meets, we're aligning as many regulating lines and proportional lines to resolve conditions with both buildings. And finally, we are studying the underside of the soffit, knowing that it's really a facade in and of itself. We did look at options where this was a glazed or a backlit illuminated glass panel. We've studied it now in a bead blasted reflective stainless steel. We think that the quieter, lighter version of stainless steel is more respectful of the adjoining buildings and leads to a general elegance as well. We can return to these in discussion to talk more about the dimensions, both of the clear spans and the connector itself, as well as answer any questions you may have about the tunnel that exists below. We can talk in detail as well about some of the work that we have in terms of the details of the connector, but in general, we're quite pleased with the elegance that we've achieved. So with that, I'll stop my presentation now, and we can transition to any questions or discussion you have. I'm more than happy to return to any image that you would like to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
You're
So
welcome.
I think commissioners, there's only 4 of us, so I don't know that we have to be so formal and raise hands. In fact, I think a dialogue going back and forth might be beneficial tonight. So if there are any comments, Seth, you're not following up with comments, correct?
Nope.
Okay.
All you.
So Mimi, I think hearing from the commissioners that were at the last subcommittee would be helpful, since that was the guidance that I got.
Correct. I do, the pedestrian bridges were a couple of meetings ago. I would
Yeah,
say
they were a
3 or
while ago.
4. Yeah, they were a while ago. I do know that I was there, and Shauna and Bill, I believe you were there. But I'm happy to get the conversation going. I think the one that's the most prominent of the pedestrian bridges is the one across Brookline Ave. And I am, starting to, what I'm pleased about is that every time we see it, it gets a little bit more quiet, a little bit more lighter and airier in feeling. And so I do think it will be present. It's going to be an object. That's definitely going to be a gateway to that area. But I do think you've worked on refining it to be lighter and lighter. I am seeing the impact, though, on the building across the way with the terracotta panel underneath. And that to me doesn't feel, I think you're in a tough position, right? Because if you can go to that rendering where the bridge connects, it's just in an upper quadrant of a larger field of glass, and it almost feels not intentional where it lands. And I definitely am not convinced that that terracotta panel underneath is the right move, but I do feel positive about that entrance being there. And so maybe it's not exactly that terracotta material, or you think about what that should be more. It's just a little bit awkward. And I'm sure you're wrestling with it and think that, you've probably tried a lot of options, but that connection into the adjacent building gives me a little bit of pause. And I wonder if even just being more silent about it, the way you have been with the bridge, is the right attitude. Like maybe it's really just a dark metal panel, and not that terracotta panel. That's in the details, but that's just stood out to me as a area of study to continue studying.
That's a good point, Mimi, because I think as the bridge is refined, that's one area that we haven't looked at as much after we refine the bridge. So we can think about that.
Yeah.
If I could just ask a follow-up question with that, Mimi.
Mhm.
I see that the existing has these horizontal sort of spandrel bands, and that you're making a choice not to continue them in what looks like a redo of that whole structural bay, right, in between the precast elements there. Can you talk a little bit more to that choice? Or is it more, Kevin, what you were saying, you got to look at it more now?
Yeah, I think we need to study it a little more. I think the intention here was because of the way the connector is hitting, those the horizontal connections of the other, the other banding. It's almost an extension of the other building, and once the connector and the bridge defines this gateway, we actually thought breaking that system made some sense, but holding, maybe thinking about that color choice and that material choice of that piece. I think what Mimi said, quieter is better in this case. And I think continuing the banding might heighten the fact that the connector is sort of an intervention in existing fabric. So I'd try to maybe not have that tension.
Are we to understand that that curtain wall is going to be replaced in its entirety once the banding
Yes,
goes away?
it's all new. So it'd be
Yes.
a much lighter, sort of more
Yeah.
sort of elegant system that's more of the new than the existing.
Yeah, I think that might give you a lot more freedom because it could be that even a framing of a pilaster equal on both sides, which doesn't exist today, might be something that rationalizes that bridge where it connects. I'm going to pass it on to Kirk.
I don't think this is sort of premised in the construct that pay no attention to this bridge, it's going away. I mean, it is there. It is long, and so I think the touchdown is a kind of rationality of physics. You know, it is supported somehow. It doesn't levitate, whether it's above a terracotta panel or a piece of glass. It actually has to rest on something. And so I guess that's part of where I wouldn't say it doesn't belong to one building and it doesn't belong to the other. I think it has to express itself as it meets those buildings. So that's just my personal thought. I guess my big thought is I'm not sure. I believe it has gotten better. I'm not sure why the horizontal, the bottom and the top both have to be as opaque as they are. I mean, given their significance in their structure, it seems you could have a bottom or a top, and then you would have more transparency through it to the sky. You know, because, and part of this is premised not just in a design reference, but in the fact that you're in a kind of a canyon coming down through these big buildings on Brookline Ave. And anything you can do to make opacity go away, I think is a benefit. And so I'd almost imagine the bottom exists and the top goes away or gets very transparent, or vice versa. But that's going to be my comment. Do we want to stay on this before we go to the other Pilgrim Road, maybe, to not confuse people?
Yes, I recommend that.
All right, so why don't I lateral to one of my fellow commissioners?
So I'm just going to jump in on this. Most of my comments are on the other bridge, but the one thing I was wondering about, could we go to the view we were just looking at previously for a second? And I do understand I'm sure looked at many options, but I've always been wondering about the kind of softening the underside and the corners on the underside, if that was explored as part, so that it is picking up on some of the, not exactly the same as the main building, the curvaceousness, but just feeling more a little bit anthropomorphic than it does currently, like the belly of a snake going across or something. If you did look at that.
So Michael, if you put up the section,
Sure.
I think Shauna's maybe talking about, even something as simple as filleting the corners.
Curving the corners more. Yeah.
That might also make it appear lighter as well.
And I don't know if it's a good or a bad idea, but that's what I've always been wondering about since the very first viewing of this, because coming underneath so much, Kirk's talking about a very strong expression as you're going down the street, but when you're right underneath it, having something to, to celebrate.
Yeah, so we are working with Studio NYL as facade consultants on the bridge, and I think we are endeavoring to make this as light and elegant as possible. We are caught in some ways between the energy code and patient privacy, and as we cross the bridge, so I think we've tried to strike a balance between the continuity of that patient experience as they're crossing, but also to make it as light and open as possible. But the resolution and continuing to look at how we meet the sky and support the roof and drain it safely, as well as the minimizing the structure at the bottom are absolutely next on our list.
The curved underside, of course, ties the bridge together with the new building in a pretty obvious way, but a possibly good way. but then it does ask the question when the bridge connects to the old building on the other side of the street, do you want to do something?
Sorry, Bill. Sorry, I apologize.
What? So the where you were drawing the curved underside of this bridge connecting to the new building does bring, a desirable connection to the curvaceousness of the new building. My question is, would you also somehow, where the bridge connects to the old building across the street, bring some element of those curves into that moment? Just a question as you're looking at it in the future.
Yeah, that definitely, Bill, would be something to consider, particularly in the portal itself, that those forms and shape might inform that.
I would think that if you're going to do that fillet at the bottom, which I think would be a really nice softening move, I do think that there's this weird tension now with the glass coming all the way down to the bottom. It might want to stop short of the top of the fillet. Maybe the section is the best way to describe what I'm talking about. Because right now, the glass, if I'm looking at the detail in the lower right-hand corner, it disengages from the bottom. So if that element, the bottom now curves, maybe the glass is a little bit shorter and not, it still has that overhang, but not to the bottom of the curved surface. Maybe I'll just draw it if that's better.
Yeah,
Sure.
Sorry. So this is here. Maybe the glass wants to, be tangent with where it starts to have a radius edge, and that overall reading might not be as tall. As a suggestion, I'm not here to design it, but just thinking that there is some geometry that's going to be funny if you have a curved and then you have this very plain, clean glass adjacent to it.
That's an interesting point, Mimi. One of the things, since we're on that section, one of the things we've been studying is the lighting, and you'll notice, we're trying to light these sort of cavities, both under the connector, but also the upper one as well, so that it's more of a continuously lit plane of glass that runs top to bottom.
We are looking at it. Yeah, we are looking at an acid etch for the pattern here, so that it will catch the light in a very subtle and diffuse way for the vertical surfaces of the glass. It's also very much more transparent and integrates in with the bird protective frit. But I think we did, Kevin, maybe this is a good point to talk about the underside and our position on the bottom.
Yeah. So we had an interesting discussion in our office about this initially, just because some of the other bridge precedents and some previous comments, we were thinking about lighting the underside with some illuminated glass, but we just felt like it was creating a little bit too much of a almost like a spectacle where it wanted to be more quiet. So we sort of went back with this sort of very simple stainless steel underside, just so it didn't call too much attention to itself at night. And it'll be fairly obvious anyway, just because of the vertical glass surface. So we didn't feel we needed to go all the way there. So definitely wanted to see if the commissioners agree with that move. Because there was also another thing as we were thinking about this, is we're coming from the east looking towards the bridge, that it actually defines an interesting portal as you go past the bridge and then you enter this new precinct with the park. It actually defines that in a fairly interesting way. And on one level, both sides of the street with some of the landscape on either side could help reinforce that as well. So particularly as you go past this threshold and encounter the new landscape that we talked about last week, we think it's a pretty interesting urban moment as you go through that.
But let me just ask again, in this view, on the left, the bridge touches the old building in a way that doesn't kind of connect in the same way it connects to the new building. Is that desirable?
Or is that a rendering? It felt like it was being a little bit more continuous in the other views, but this looks like a reveal.
It is a reveal in that it's like a sleeve that receives it, if you will. In the way we're detailing it, it's not that obvious. But I think could have more intention.
I would urge you to look at that pretty carefully. I personally am totally happy with most of the details of this bridge and the way it engages the new building. And this is the only part of that bridge that it bothers my eye there when I look.
Can I just ask you about making the top tier more transparent? Did you look at trying to make that go away?
We did, Kirk. So originally we had no glazing to the sky at all, and we've been working slowly and steadily to try and reduce the width of the actual perceived ceiling. Again, we're fighting and coming up against the energy code, which would have no glazing on the ceiling whatsoever, versus where we're trying to cut some corners and ease the edges to the side. We also got some feedback from the patient experience about a sense of protection and cover as patients make their way across the bridge. So there was some pretty strong feedback from the proponent side that a fully glazed bridge or a bridge that didn't provide a sense of shelter to patients as they were moving across the street was not resonating well. But we have tried to pull it back and ease those corners as much as possible.
Okay.
But we did start with a from both ends and have tested the limits.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe just to answer the under. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Can we start talking about the other bridge?
Yes, I was going to make that switch right now.
Yeah,
I just wanted to acknowledge that I think the reflected stainless steel is a more positive direction than the illuminated glass. I feel like the illuminated glass calls too much attention to itself, and I think we're all about lightness. So I just wanted to give you guys some feedback on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you.
But I agree. Let's shift over to Pilgrim Road.
So could I ask you to show us the view that you see the ground floor and the second floor in the same rendering? In other words, looking across Pilgrim Road, and I'd like to have something that shows us the ground floor condition as well as the second. There we go. That's perfect. So my one concern, I by the way, everything you've done at the second level here, from my point of view, is quite beautiful and elegant, and maybe I would add the roof. My problem is the first floor, that it seems very solid, so that there's not a clear relationship between the first floor and the second floor, even as the first floor is actually quite visible to people in the park. And I'm wondering, I'm not asking it to be all glass, but right now it looks like it's 85%. Is it a stone material?
It's the same material, Bill. It's the weathering steel, but it's perforated, and the slots are where the windows are. You'll notice there's some vertical slots that happens to be where some of the windows are.
But my question is, why can't you have more vertical slots and more windows in that? Not as much as on the second floor, but the juxtaposition of the nice glass of the second floor and the absence of glass on the first floor makes the first floor seem very cold and unwelcoming.
Well, the
So-
first floor is a little different in the sense it's a screen that's in front of the existing building, so there is no glass, but we could add more apertures or gaps between the panels. Michael, a plan might be good to just show,
Per section.
as plan or section to show the relationship.
So,
Yep.
so
The hatched
Yeah.
zone is the area in between the screen and the face of the existing building. In this particular plan, you can't see the cadence of the windows on Deaconess. But
right,
what we're doing is the gaps in those panels align themselves with some of the windows on Deaconess. And then the panels themselves are also very perforated so that you can sort of see a filtered light through them. We didn't make it very easy for you to see that in some of these
Agreed.
renderings. Like,
well, let me just ask, is there a reason why in a project of this size, nine figures or 10 figures, 9 figures, that you can't remove some of the stonework or whatever's in the Deaconess building, so that it opens itself up like the rest of the building is trying to do?
Michael, I'll let you
Oh,
deal with that one.
sure.
That's a hornet's nest.
It is. The balance we're trying to strike here, Bill, is to minimize the disruption to those programs. We do have a meeting later this week with the proponent to review carefully all of the functions that will occur and do occur in Deaconess and the FAR building behind here. We do want to make sure that that those areas on the ground and the first floor. Let me just bring up a detailed section here with some of the existing photos. We're in an English basement situation here, so there are some windows that are giving light into the basement below, and some to some office spaces that are on the first floor. So I agree that trying to coordinate some more filtered light and transparency to those openings would be beneficial. But we're also holding the connector back so that it's completely structured independently of the Deaconess building. Partly we want to avoid seismic upgrades or any disruptions to some pretty critical programs that occur on multiple floors of that building: cardiac care units, inpatient units for mental health and behavioral health that really can't take the interruption of having large sections of their facade undergo extensive renovation or opening work.
Well, it seems sad to be spending this kind of money and then having these kind of, to me, seemingly minor architectural details starting to dominate this one part of the project. I mean, that's, I don't know what it takes to remove some parts of those walls or opening it up or reusing those spaces in a different way. I mean, I don't know those details, but we're seeing right here what you're left with, and it just doesn't feel very good. And I do think this second level is perfectly fine and good, and so it was this lower level that feels like it's much too solid.
Michael, maybe you could go to that perspective of standing underneath the
Sure.
connector and that relationship there.
So here, I think what we're seeing, there's a very definitive rhythm that we've established that telegraphs the the module of the glazing and the sunshades above that then translates to a rhythm here at the loggia. As we're negotiating structure that's supporting the building, some changes in plane in the building behind, we're working in this view. We push that back to create these niches for seating in those. I think this, as Kevin was saying, are some of those areas where we might get more transparency, or maybe look at the pattern or the apertures of the perforation to try and get more of a sense of connection to the building beyond. But we did, I think, carefully study through many iterations the balance between a solidity and a weight at the base of the connector that implied a building-like aspect to it versus a lightness. And that when we started to have too much open below, that a certain stability was lost to the overall structure. So I think, Kevin, you might agree that we're trying to find that right balance.
Yeah, and I actually think, Michael, for maybe the next time we present this, we do a view that's like standing straight in front of the panel so that you can actually see what you can see behind it, because it reads very solid here. But that's not the intention. I'm also thinking the pilgrim view, Michael, that's sort of oblique looking up, gives you a good sense of this too. I do think we could, you can see the rhythm of those apertures, and we can sort of add additional apertures, but we can also increase the intensity of the perforation so that you sort of have this simultaneity of the surface in front and the building behind, and you're aware of both, which is part of the intent.
Well, this is a very good view to deal with what I'm talking about, and I hear you, Michael, when you say you wanted to have the solidity, but I guess I'm questioning whether that solidity has gotten too strong.
Yeah.
This is
understood.
This is going to be a well-traveled sidewalk, and it feels out of, alien to the rest of the intentions of the project. So that's my comment.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Thanks.
I'm totally happy with what we're seeing.
Thanks, Bill. Shauna, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the presentation again and on this. And I have two very conflicting directions to be talking about the project. First of all, I think that sort of architecturally, it's developed in a very nice way, very handsome way. I think that the planting on the top works. I think the fastigiate trees are a little bit awkward. It might be worth looking at, a green screen or a living wall strategy or green columns, but something that is more directly responsive to the architecture, because I think we won't be able to, to keep the fastigiate trees in sort of perfect clipped condition. And they also aren't particularly working well with the I don't think they're working very well with the spacing of the mullions or whatever or the fins, particularly as they're splaying. So I think that is awkward. I like the idea of the green, but doing it in a more architectural way, I think might be more helpful. But and I think I said this in the very first meeting. For me, this isn't a bridge, where the other parts of the project are bridging across, across the roadways. And I'm still not comfortable with the idea of the circulation cantilevering along over top of the public sidewalk. So from that side, I think the building it looks like a building, and it's very handsome and looks like a fitting end to the street. I wish it were a temporary connection until the time that the deaconess was redeveloped, because I know we had talked early on in your first presentation, could we absorb that into the deaconess building? And at that point, which I think is still very much the case, that the psychiatric beds are so critical in that building currently. But at some point, I think there will be the expectation that the deaconess is redeveloped. And at that time, I would love if this albeit extremely handsome, circulation connection is absorbed into the private property and not the public property of the street.
Maybe,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Maybe.
no, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say that Chris Donahue from MBVA is here. Shauna, if there's more particular questions about landscape or planting you'd like to engage him on, we did look at options of the green screen or other variants as opposed to trees. Chris gave us some pretty strong feedback from a landscape perspective about the maintainability of that landscape over time, as well as what it's like from the patient experience on the inside out. So I think Chris is here to answer those questions, and Jared from BIDMC is also here. If we want to delve into the idea of the lifespan of the connector and when it might actually be replaced in 20 to 30 years.
I mean, I have a lot of faith in with respect to because I know the complications of green screen or living walls to maintain. I know there are strategies to do it. It's not necessarily the most straightforward thing that you plant it once and leave it. I know you can, the idea there could be some of the plants are replaced once or twice a year in order to get something. But I guess what I'm really getting at is I don't think that the architecture and the landscape, and to me, it looks like the trees are masking the architecture or trying to. But I have faith. You have an excellent landscape architecture team and landscape architect. So I have faith that you can work that part out. I think I'd love to hear the other part though about the lifespan of the connector.
So I think I don't know, Seth, if we want to promote Jared to respond from BI's particular perspective around their advanced or long-term planning for the site. But I think we've heard Jared's. I don't want to speak for him too strongly, but that the
Lizzie,
replacement of the
if you
connector
could elevate Jared
is
Dorr.
is quite some time in the future.
Jared should be elevated now.
We put you on the spot, Jared. Not sure if you want to respond to that.
I'm here. I was just trying to press the unmute button. Yeah, I mean, we do not have that in our 10-year master plan right now. We that is a site that's in the future. But it's hard to say what's going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years, but we do not, and we've said this publicly, is like it's not in our next 10 to 15-year plan. The one thing that I'd be concerned with having to take this bridge away is the continuity of care. So we have to provide this connection, obviously. And if we were going to have it go away and integrate it into a new building, we would definitely have an impact for the patient care for the future cancer hospital. So it's a tough question.
Yeah, unless it were active until the new building was constructed. But
and I know, speaking from the city's point of view, obviously any connectors over public rights of way we do not take lightly. No pun intended. And I think in this case, we've traditionally seen connectors that are perpendicular or generally perpendicular to the right of way. Here's one that is proposed along and above a right of way, and it is certainly the city's preference that this not be a, let's say, true forever condition. That this, but also recognizing, to Jared's point, that it is not something that's envisioned in the lifespan of the 10-year IMP that's before us. So I think our desire would be that any future redevelopment of the sites behind it would include a connection that operationally, would be integrated into those buildings, so that over time this, element over the public right of way has the possibility of going away. Specifics all to be determined down the road.
Maybe I'll chime in and say, I will acknowledge that from the first time you showed us this bridge, you guys have come a long, long way. So I think, the fact that we're even, talking about planting, I think you should read as pretty much a good sign. I do want to go back to, to me, this would be more successful as an arcade rather than a cantilever. And I'm sure there's been some back and forth with PIC that they're not letting you, but I'm going to bring it up again because I really feel like those end conditions would benefit so much from coming down to the ground only at the ends. I'm not even suggesting to have a real arcade throughout. And I'm just going to reference, I'm sure you guys know this example, you've been probably looking at it, but the St. James Terminal in New York City, in Hudson Square, the way the end walls come back down and it has this garden end condition, I think would be one to look at. I really think it would just rationalize this as an arcade rather than a bridge at this one moment. And then to reiterate on Shauna's comment on the trees, I think the issue that is happening is that they're too well, they look too tight. They look like they don't even have a place to grow, but they're too repetitive of the architecture. And I feel like the landscape is used very loosely on the roof and very organically and carefree, but somehow that architectural rhythm of the trees is opposite that. So I think some softening of that. I'm not saying no trees, but I just feel like that just emphasizing that vertical rhythm doesn't, to me, isn't a right balance between the lushness of the landscape and the rigidity of the architecture. And then the one comment in plan, that jog, I just want to question that jog. Do you really need to follow the jogs of the building behind? I'm not even exactly sure what happens between the screen wall and the face of the Deaconess building, what happens in that gap. But there is some, let's call it, a gap. Could you just make that gap instead of consistent from the offset? Could it just be in line in one plane? And in order for this to really resonate, you probably have to go to a plan to show what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
No, I totally understood, Mimi. Do you want to start, Kevin, and I can fill in?
Yeah. So the area, so the offset is created because there's structure that comes down in that gap behind there. So that's why it's so pronounced on the right hand side. And then you could extend it in that same plane, but that offset that we created where we could step it back, we did that so that we could place benches along the sidewalk. So if that wall was kept all at the sort of the same area, you'd only have the 8-foot sidewalk, and that's why we did it. We thought it was made it a little less monolithic, if you will, too.
Yeah.
But
and we owe you
Kevin,
a better plan.
how wide is the sidewalk on the right-hand side?
On the right-hand side, it's 8 feet wide, and then it's wider than that on the left-hand side.
So that minimum 8-foot dimension is established at the narrowest point and carries through. So once we clear the pinch point of the columns, we widen the sidewalk, and then we create niches on top of that where we're able to. So in general, there is a small zone in front that's more in front of the current formal entry to Deaconess where it's compressed, but both to the east and the west, we're really expanding that public realm as deep as we can around the structure.
But Michael, we could, in that setback zone, extend the wall in a single plane, but then carve out niches for the seating in lieu of stepping the wall.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering. I don't think it's going to be a place where people are going to want to sit. In fact, I think if you're building a bridge, I hope they're using the bridge, not necessarily a ton of traffic on the sidewalk. So I think in this case, we could have just an 8-foot sidewalk and then niches where you can accommodate benches.
So I guess I'm going to offer a contrarian view on not wanting to use the ground plane. I'm wondering how we can make it an experience that people do like. And I mean, I can think of a range of things that might do that, from heat lamps in winter to vertical water walls in summer to digital scrims that could either be on this level or both levels that might be backdrop to the park. So, I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity to maybe make this a place people want to go and look out from, or at different times of the year. And maybe thinking about all the static individuals who are stuck in rooms and can't be mobile. How do we not sort of make this go away with architecture, but celebrate it, say, with the digital scrim that might, I don't know, be flowers or be green or whatever you think. So that's just a different approach to it from my view. And I don't know if you thought about it at all.
Well, the one thing, Kirk, that we've thought about quite a bit is the lighting under there, not necessarily, water features or things like that, but in terms of creating a cadence and a rhythm of the light that's sort of lighting the rhythm of the underside of the soffit, but also lighting those panels so that you have a very sort of inviting cadence of light at night, in particular. Michael, I don't know if there are any other things that are coming to mind that you can think of too, but it's this fine line. We're trying to create a place where, if it's raining, people could sit and be outside, or if it's in the shade versus in the bright sun, that there might be a real benefit to sitting there.
Yeah. You took the words out of my mouth, Kevin.
Yeah.
I also think there's a balance of too much investment, which makes it feel more permanent. And we're, I'm on the Shauna camp of temporary as this could be. I think it's a real benefit, for us. It has to be nice. It's going to be here a long time. And I don't know. I just wonder if we start putting water walls and green walls, does it become become a more permanent draw long term?
So this is Jared. Just one thing to note is a lot of patients are parking in the Pilgrim Road garage and walking to the ED, or may have breathing issues that, like, we do have a bench or two there that they can sit down and for respite. So it is kind of important because those people won't be taking the bridge. They'll be parking in the Pilgrim Road garage and walking down this area because it's heavily traveled, or they're going to the FAR building to provide, for other care. So there's some there's a heart failure clinic in the FAR building, which that's the route they would take. They would park in the Pilgrim Road garage and walk down this arcade. So it would be nice for patients to be able to sit if they're feeling a little out of breath.
I guess the only point I was going to make is that given that there's only one park in the LMA that I'm aware of, or one large park, to waste an edge, there is no sacrificial edge. Somehow this has to become a place people want to be, in my mind, because it looks out to what you're seeing right here, which you can't see anywhere else, right? So I guess in the public realm benefit parlance, in my mind, one of the benefits is proximity and enjoyment of this. However you make that happen, I'm not sure. So anyway, that was the only comment I was going to make.
Okay, commissioners, just as a time check, I've been deliberating on the bridges for about 42 minutes. I'd like to have some additional discussion on the bridges or move to look at the building.
And we look at the building?
And we can, of course, always return to bridges now in
Yeah.
the context of the building after that presentation as well.
I do just have one comment that I just don't want to forget about the connection. I don't know what we call the glass connection for the Pilgrim Road Bridge. I know that you're doing a lot of, from point A to point B, and I know that study that you showed us in plan, Michael, of how you're connecting. It does feel, I'm a little bit torn about the fillets and if, they're necessary. That's just my only comment. Like, is that the most direct way to get from, One Joslin to this new bridge along Pilgrim Road. And where you can see the fillets is through another perspective. So that's just a question that I have.
It's an excellent question, Mimi, and we did look in exquisite detail after your challenge to try and see if we were able to move. Let me go to perhaps I'll go to a plan of the connector. That might be easier here at the third floor. So we did look at trying to move that fire stair. That is one of our only spaces in the cancer hospital that links across. We tried to move that as far to the left on screen as possible, and the fillet connections are actually rather eased here. What they're doing is mimicking the path that a patient stretcher or a bed would take when a patient with their equipped the set of caregivers might be moving them to or from the emergency room and back and forth. So that specifically on this crossing, the easing of those edges are very much derivative of the patient movement, whether that's into the observation unit, to the elevators, or rounding that corner. At the other end, I think we're again trying to find a balance of an efficient structure, but also making that other chicane into the elevator lobby to the left-hand side. I think we would definitely have tried to regularize the crossing as much as we could, but this is the closest we could get to a clear span straight from where we can bear in the hospital to the connector.
I only raise it because it's the only place where you're actually curving in plan of all of the connections that you've shown tonight. So just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah.
Okay, we can move to the building. Thank you.
Let me transition.
Now, believe it or not, the building should be simpler because there's nothing completely brand new in there. It's just refinement.
Let me share my screen. The building architecture.
Yeah.
So let's return to the main structure, knowing that it is linked to the hospital connectors. When we last met, we got a number of challenges from you to address parts of the building in more specific detail, where the petals land or their relationships to the entry. Are those fixed, or is there any flexibility to look at modifying those entry positions? We've taken a deeper dive and are working around the louvers and the frit pattern to assess that materiality, as well as our development on the trim. We also took a very critical look again at the north facade, at the abutter, so our view to our neighbors at Longwood Center, and both the composition and the materiality of that, and then we can return again to what we just covered of how the connectors meet the existing building. For overall, just as a reminder, the general architecture is drawn from a combination of, or the synthesis of softness and warmth, meant to express the patient care and the interior environment, as well as the expression of program on the exterior. As a reminder, Kevin, if you want to step in here at any point on these views.
Yeah, so we're going to show you just almost a reminder of where this is where we are, but it also is very much where we were the last time we met. One of the things that, and you can cycle to the next view, Michael, one of the things that we've been looking at is the color of the stem, which is a dark bronze, and that is in the middle of the building. It connects the petals. And actually thinking about simplifying the palette overall for the building. And so as we look to the different parts of the building, particularly the back of the building along Longwood Center, the facade on Pilgrim, we're starting to think of all the metal on the building that's behind the petals being that same color, where we had that as a dark gray before. So as we cycle through these views, you're going to start to see that color emerge in a number of places. And it's really representative of the stem, but it's also representative of the armature that's behind the petals. So this is yeah,
I was
this
just
is a
going to say,
view.
Kevin, yeah, in this view here, we've imposed the new or the proposed roadway realignments of Joslin Place. So this would be that that extension of the park that expands the public realm at Brookline Avenue. We removed the trees, but this now starts to clarify the relationship of the new entry and stem landing with the proposed road realignments.
Yeah, and one of the views you put the trees back. I don't think it's in this one, but
No.
later I think. So this is sort of the view, the elevation looking from the park, Joslin Place. There are a couple things that came up in our last review. The louvers were an area where you wanted to see how we were going to develop that. So we have some mock-ups we're going to share with you. The rain screen with the fritted glass cladding will show you some details. They're largely the same, and there's been some tuning of the mullion caps or these ornamental trims that we're going to show you. So if we just go to the next view, this is the tower pedal system, the glass rain screen, largely the same from the last time we met. The next. And then the next, this just shows you sort of the relationship of the mullion cap to the vision glass window in the patient room. It's really tuned to represent that dimension of the vision glass. And you can just see the metal trim in that interface detail here. In the next view, this is indicative of all the studies that have been done, sort of looking at the cadence of these mullion caps. The one that's on the facade is in the lower right. When you look at a petal under a microscope, it has a cellular structure that is pretty regular, but also not quite. And so we have this sort of regular yet dynamic quality to these mullion caps that are all justified to one side or the other of the patient windows.
And Kevin, it's probably important to note that these patterns are consistent on the two primary petals, or sort of the three primary petals. So the two that we're seeing here facing Joslin Park, but also the corner of this and then the third petal, which face Brookline Avenue. So that staccato pattern does exist comprehensively on both the petal surfaces.
And then the louvers. So this is one of the things that you asked us about in the last meeting. So what we're going to do is show you a mock-up for the louvers that are embedded in the petal, which has sort of a perforated metal screen with the louvers behind them. And the dots in the screen are very much analogous to the frit. So if we cycle through, Michael, we
Sure.
can maybe look at that. So this is a plan detail of what we're talking about in terms of the relationship of the screen to the louver. That's well, this is the typical glass. I'm sorry.
No, so this is Kevin showing the coordination of the unitization module of the building and the integration of the stainless steel scrims that conceal the rain louvers behind. This is where we started to now look at both the materiality and the finish. But it's, I think in these, Kevin, we took them outside. We're spinning these around to try and look at engage the relationship of the frit pattern to the louver itself.
And so the bottom here is a literal mock-up with a perforated metal panel and the frit texture below that. So we're just starting to really look at these things, but this was at least a first litmus test that proved that it looks pretty good. So we're going to take this further and do some tabletop mock-ups and things like that as a next step. These are the same models that Michael showed you before, with the pedal and the trim and all these intersections. So now Michael's going to take you on a tour of some of the refinements along Brookline Avenue and the garden, and then we'll get to the Pilgrim Road facade where there have been some refinements there as well.
Thank you, Kevin. So zooming in more closely, we were, I think, challenged to look at the materiality more specifically in the public realm, and to, I think Kevin used the word earlier, to calm the palette down and bring a little more refinement to it. So more specifically, if we start here at the corner, the primary visitor entry, the main lobby with what we're developing as an interior interfaith garden space, and then the retail frontage to our right as we move beyond. Developing the transparency, though, of the lobby and this interior garden is incredibly key. Again, Chris is here taking precedent from Halibut State Point of blurring the lines between the inside and the outside as the main facade of the building wraps the corner, and this beneficial space for both the patients and both the visitors and staff telegraphs itself out to the corner and beyond. You do see now, Mimi, that the relationship of the main entry and the critical dimension from our accessible drop-off to the vestibule, we've really worked to try and find the sweet spot east to west for balancing the necessary patient amenity spaces, the size of the reception and vestibule area, and then balancing the space at the side.
And you're a bit over
garden.
halftime.
Perfect, Seth. Thank you. As we move now to the materiality of along Brookline Avenue, we did make some revisions here that we think are adding a lot more continuity to the urban realm. So what we've done here with the storefronts is to extend the language of terracotta that begins at this gasket that separates the future cancer hospital from Longwood Center to the right. So as a part of our project, we will be recladding portions of the Longwood Center to match and extend that existing metal panel cladding to where it will meet the new building. We're a little lower in some parts for this gasket than the existing Joslin building, but that terracotta language that's both a veil for glazing into staircases and interior spaces is now extended all the way along grade, creating panels of opacity that separate out up to 3 potential retail venues here. We've also changed and warmed the tonality of the louvers so that everything now within the pedestrian realm has this rich, warm tone drawing from the terracotta and the copper metal panels. And to look at that in perspective, again, apologies that the fruit patterns are not respective in this of the glazing on this sketch view rendering, nor are the perforations on the stem. But the idea is that with a slight cantilever within the property line over the retail area, that we're creating this arcade that extends the language and the active streetscape of Longwood Center at the ground plane with this warm series of bronze colors that set up distinct entries for the retail. As we move around now to the main entry, we're developing a very, I think, refined kit of parts for these terracotta baguettes to remind you that they are serving multiple functions here. They're both screening veiled glazing for some of these more private patient service areas near the main entry, but they're also concealing louvers for some of our air intake, all sitting above a very robust stone base as how the building meets the ground in a way that collects all of the accoutrement that we need to have there, but also protects the system as well. So we're looking at a series of A, B, and C profiles where with a very simple language and a kit of parts that we can add a lot of variety and richness to the ground plane here between the overhanging canopies and this stone base, which collects us around the outside. As a reminder, it's hard to convey the depth of the facade system here. So in this model that you see on the left-hand side, as the trims do protrude as they wrap the petals, they expand to become the patient canopy that then reveals a skylight to bring daylight through it. But we're at almost 21 feet or greater at its lowest point. Then as Joslin Place slopes up to about 16'6" clear at the lowest point of that canopy at the uphill slope for the drop-off. Then as we round the corner looking at Pilgrim Road, we've changed the tonality here. So previously, again, using the same terracotta system to conceal some glazing and louvers, we've warmed the tone of the set piece that collects the loading dock doors, the parking garage entry, some additional garage ventilation louvers, and the staff entry into a singular unit that then begins to carry the scale across of some of the setbacks at Longwood Center to really calm down the pedestrian experience here at the Pilgrim Road facade. Kevin, maybe this is a good point as well to talk about the change in coloration and materiality for the north portions of the building.
Yeah, so the last time we presented this was a dark charcoal gray that was on the upper portion of the building in the area behind Longwood Center. What we're proposing here is the dark bronze that we're using for the stem, and then that would continue back along Longwood Center. The loading dock doors, the parking garage doors, and the metal panel at the base are intended to be very, very the same tone as this. So it's almost one system. You have the terracotta, you have the petals, and you have the dark bronze. And this is just to show you a comparison between the charcoal gray and the dark bronze on the Longwood Center facade. So it warms up the building, but also at the same time creates a much more holistic palette for the entire thing. So with that, Michael, I think the back facade really we're just showing the windows are, where the elevators are, and some of the staff zones or corridor transparencies on the back. We tried to keep the facade incredibly simple and plainer on the back. And we did look at several different systems, things that were more horizontal in nature, and we erred on the side of simplicity here, given the simple, plainer language of the glass and the glazing on the other facades.
So that concludes our update on some of the design challenges and explorations that were performed in response to some of your comments at the last section. But we'll close with this Brookline Avenue view. Here we see the updated rendering that we shared of the building, but winter is long. And nights are dark in New England. So we are working very closely with Borealis, our lighting consultant, to see what the impact of the building is at night on the landscape of Longwood medical and academic area, as well as the city. So the idea here is to have a very, very subtle lighting effect that accentuates the inner trim of the petals. So this would be a very, very subtle lighting feature that would offset and accentuate the differentiation of the petal versus the stem at those key moments that Kevin described. But also at night, the warm inner shell of the building begins to reveal itself through the fruity glazing of the exterior. So in the blow-up image on the left-hand side, you see hints at the wood soffits that enclose the family areas of each of the patient rooms as they make their way along the facade of the building. So as day turns to night and the building comes to life, there's this reveal of the interior of this very warm and sheltering embrace at the patient level. So again, that combination or synthesis of the softness and the warmth that was our original concept transcribed now to its reveal at night.
And Michael, I just want to clarify one thing with the lighting along the stem. The artificial light is only at the portion that's down where the canopy sort of bends. Everything above that point is just ambient light that's coming out from the inside. So we're not lighting it all the way up the facade. It's really mostly supposed to be a little more intense at the base and very gentle at the top.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, and with that, you guys are at time. Commissioners.
I'll go since no one else. I'm actually not going to be very long on it. I think that the as we discussed the last time we looked at the building, I think it's very, very elegant and the conceptually strong. I like the improvements of the, or I don't even know if we saw it before, but the development of the retail space along Brookline now. And I also like Pilgrim much more than last time. I'm a little bit confused though in the presentation because the elevation we were looking at, we could look at that elevation on Pilgrim.
Sure. 1 second, Shauna.
Really, it's the coloration I'm confused
Sure.
about, because the elevation that we were looking at, there was a prior elevation to this, prior view to this, where everything was light colored. So this is what I'm a little bit confused about. If these are the same color tone, these two views we were just looking at, because looking at the door, the garage doors, they look quite light and silvery, and then but you were describing them on the next view, they're quite dark. What I don't like about this view is sort of the patchwork of the dark doors and then the light panels on either side. So
totally
either
agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
So either they become all dark, that whole bottom part that isn't the skinny fins becomes all dark, or I think that's the direction I like, or I think all light is a little bit too much. But that's a small
The
detail.
intention, Shauna, is that all metal that isn't petal is that sort of dark bronze color, whether it's a loading dock door or the panel next to the loading dock door or the upper body of the building up above. So I agree with you. It's a little patchwork. It has to do with some of the lighting, and we didn't really nail it in this view. It's a little better in the blow up view.
And then I do think that the evening experience, that the views of the lighting on, kind of the sort of the Brookline and the Joslin Park facade are really beautiful. I think it's also important, though, let's go back to Pilgrim, to take the sort of care and elegance that has been put into the thinking about the lighting and simplify this and bring that same. I know it's a different type of facade and expression, but again, I don't. The care isn't quite here yet.
Yeah, and you would still get. I want to let people know this, though. You'd still get the sense of the shells on this facade as well. So that what's happening at night that's so interesting on the other facade gets revealed in a slightly different way here. But there'll be some energy here that you're not seeing in this particular drawing.
I'm just wondering if it would be simpler on this elevation to have that one end be a petal and not have this darker metal panel. It's the only place where you have, I think, hospital beds that aren't in the petal language. And would it just simplify this end elevation?
We had looked at that, Mimi. I've gone to here to this view, so there are a few patient rooms that are not in petals. Part of the change here really had to do with the proportionality of this facade and having that change of expressing an inner core of the stem versus the petals on the front. Really seem to lend a verticality and elegance to the Pilgrim Road facade, as opposed to if it were two petals, which is where we had started. Kevin, I don't know if you want to expand on that anymore, if I just butchered that response.
No, that's fine, Michael. Yeah, our first instinct was that, Mimi, and it lost some of the hierarchy that maybe we had on the Brookline facade here, just because the similarity. And to be quite honest, there is a big cost issue that's going on here. So the main petals on Brookline and Joslin Place, carry a certain amount of civic weight in terms of their frontality. And so this seemed to be a moment where we could scale it, and it has a lot to do with that language of the loading dock, the garage doors, and the back of the building as it goes up along Brookline. So it's almost like we got to this point where we saw it as almost revealing the inner fabric of the building that's behind the petals, and that it might be interesting in that way.
If I might speak up, can you bring back the views looking at Joslin Park and Brookline Ave? Yes. So I just want to compliment you. I think the petals have become much more subtle and more interesting. The patterning of the windows and all of that, I think, are quite brilliant. And I think the what do you call the background elements that are not petals here?
Stem.
Stem. The stems are very exciting. And what I guess I like about this so much is that the excitement of the stems and the tying into the bridges and even the tying together with the park is still kind of well controlled. And the boldness of the petals is not a boldness that overwhelms the building. And so I just say you've really reached a nice balance for the stem and the petals, and keep moving in this direction. I'll leave it to others to deal with Pilgrim Road elevation.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I feel like you've added these vertical mullions from the last time that we met, which really gives it a nice texture. Or am I misremembering that? Are those vertical mullions as pronounced?
I don't think we've refined them, and that they're a little more part of the narrative than the last time we spoke. So
yeah, so, and I do think that that rhythm gives it scale, because I was worried that it's just too flat of a surface. But that's what's also nice about it, you know, that attention to the perforated louvers matching the frit pattern, all of that is great. But these vertical elements will give it scale, which I think will be a positive for sure. You know, I'm just going to make one last pitch for that Pilgrim Road petal, because that's the way you're seeing the Brookline Ave, you know, corner detail where you have the petal in the corner, it breaks and then becomes another petal. I really think that that would be an awesome improvement to Pilgrim Road. And I'll rest my case, but I will also agree that the ground elevations have really gotten very, very nice and elegant along Brookline Ave with the retail. The entry, I think, looks really good. So
do you mind if we sorry to beat you know, I'll keep beating up on the same topic, but could we look at the Pilgrim Road facade again? I'm just looking at Mimi's idea of folding the petal around the corner, which it already is doing. Okay. Yeah. I think just the more however we can achieve a simplification on this facade, I think is the better.
Do you have any elevations of the Brookline Avenue view looking towards the Jamaica Way of this facade?
So Brookline Avenue towards the Jamaica Way?
Yeah, looking from the Fenway
Yes.
down Brookline Avenue.
Oh,
because we don't see much of that, because obviously it's less.
So this is a view from the Riverway back toward the building to the east. I think Kirk, you were looking for perhaps this view, which is this view is from the Riverway looking inbound.
And what about the other direction? In other words, what does the building do on its leading edge closest to Shapiro, for instance? You can't really see it from here, but when you're like on the corner part of Brookline and what is that, where Children's Hospital is?
From Shapiro Plaza, closer.
Yeah.
Closer to the East Campus at Longwood.
That would be approximately this. So this is a little further out. So Shapiro Plaza is here. We've just stepped closer.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see where, if you're closer to the CVS, you actually see the building. Is there a view that looks obliquely towards Joslin Park?
We do not have that view, Kirk. We took this view looking in the opposite direction, so back towards Longwood, to study the relationship of of how we meet at this gasket from our building to Longwood, we do step back to widen the realm. It may be a view, is it more, hold on one second. Sort of this, if we look at the model view on the right, sort of this view, this would be taken almost in front of the CVS, looking back towards Joslin Park.
I'm actually just trying to see where the building returns towards the existing structure that's on the corner.
That would be, not to get anybody woozy, let me go back to this view here. So I can show you it in plan again, but Longwood Center, so the Longwood Center facade is at the street, is at the property line. It does set back at Longwood Center, sets back a grade. We set back a little further than that to create a widened pedestrian realm for a little bit more area in front of the retail. So we do, what you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen is our gasket stepping back, and the building is still a little proud of that, but we do not align with the Longwood Center facade.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I will beat a dead horse and just say from the riverway, I think that it was even more convincing of a view. I don't even think you showed us that view about the Pilgrim Road elevation. So I really would love for you guys to think about it.
We will discuss it with the proponents.
Commissioners, any other comments? Not, we can go to public comments.
None here.
Hey, Lizzie, if you can put up the public comment slide, please. So at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I will call on you. If you are calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep comments to 2 minutes. Okay, I am seeing one hand. Dolores, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Dolores Bogdanian. I live at 452 Park Drive in Boston. And I understand these hearings and discussions relate to the public realm. And in that context, this building will cast at least 90 minutes of new shadow on the Riverway and Emerald Necklace Parkland in the spring and fall seasons, when sunlight is most important for triggering all of the natural systems that depend on light, and all of them do. If you've looked at the shadow study for the building, you will have made note that this building will fill in one of the few remaining gaps of sunlight on this stretch of the park in the spring and fall. In light of this, whatever planting beds or greenery are put in by the proponent, they are, cheap and inadequate substitutes for our existing public parklands, which also happens to be an historic landscape. The proponent's landscaping plans are merely improvements to private property and an institutional campus. Our parks, on the other hand, are public land and a critically important source of oxygen if there is photosynthesis and if there is sunlight, as well as a source of mental and physical health. We may treat cancer, but we will never beat it as long as we continue to despoil our environment and stress our bodies and immune systems. I am despairing for our parks in Boston, and I am losing respect for our city agencies and officers that and who should be protecting them. This project should be modified to avoid casting additional shadow on our public parklands, and I call on you to demand that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Dolores. And a point of clarification for the commissioners, as this project is part of 2 IMPs, institutional master plans, that were previously approved, it was during that process that the zoning envelope was set for this building, and that the shadows were studied as part of that process. So I wanted to just offer that clarification. I also want to add the clarification that as part of the mitigation for this project, including the shadows that it does create, 90 minutes, as Dolores mentioned, in the springtime on the fens. The project proponent is investing significant funds to the redevelopment of Joslin Park, which is a City of Boston park, and will remain a City of Boston park, as well as additional funds as mitigation for the impacts. Is there any other additional public testimony? I see Allison Poltinas. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. I have a comment going back to the Pilgrim Road Bridge discussion, and this might have been brought up a long time ago, but the impact of the screening arcade or whatever device you want to call it on the Deaconess building, and how that impacts the staff and patients that are currently in Deaconess. And it was mentioned it's a behavioral health, mental health patient beds in there. And so the height of this and the solidity of the arcade will be blocking light. So wondering if there's a reconsideration of how that will affect those patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Let me make a clarification for you on that comment to my earlier description. The inpatient unit that is in the Deaconess building is on the 4th floor. The 4th floor will not be covered by the connector, and it's at that point where the new plantings on the roof of the connector will act as a benefit to that inpatient unit as a kind of healing garden, or mitigating their view, a way of bringing the park to those patients at the upper floor. We are working very closely with the proponent and have been working very closely with them to assess the impacts on the lower floors of the building, which are other supporting departments, as Jared mentioned earlier.
Thank you. That's really good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and do I see any other public testimony or commentary? I do not see any other raised hands. So at this time, I will close the public comment period. And Michael, if you could bring back up the presentation for commissioner discussion. Any additional comments on any of what we've seen this evening, with an eye towards possible next steps, including the potential for final consideration at a full commission meeting?
And Seth, I will note, I'm not seeing Commissioner Ron on the call anymore, so I believe it might be up to Shauna and Kirk and myself.
Yes, he mentioned that he had a conflict close to 7, so it looks like he did drop off.
Okay.
Yeah, I have both presentations available. Let me know. I can return to either.
So I think our charge is to decide if we have any recommendations for them to revisit. Maybe we should start with the bridge presentation. I think Brookline Avenue comments we heard, we're looking at the underside of the bridge, trying to soften that up. And we talked a lot about the connection detail. Yep, at that viewpoint. And I think we're, Kirk, you asked about being able to remove some of the solidness of the roof area. I think there's that tension between patient comfort and opening that up. But I'll just offer that as still a comment that you're concerned about.
Yeah, I think there's a happy medium somewhere between how you address that, and also the view for the majority of the city who travels on this road. And there's no doubt more transparency would be better in my mind. So I think going back and looking a little bit, minimizing, or I don't know if it's suspending something more at the pedestrian experience level that could be more minimal, but that the actual, fuselage would be more transparent. There's got to be some thoughts about how to do this, but clearly you don't need all that structure. There's very beefy structure in the base, and the more that appears as an elevated plank, to me, is advantageous to the street experience and how people view the Fenway, et cetera. So I would encourage you to continue to work on that. I don't see that as holding the project up. I do think the way the touchdowns happen on each side is worthy of some consideration. It's not levitating. So, deciding how to deal with that, I think I'd be very comfortable with staff working through that with the proponents and with the comments you made, Mimi, about addressing the terracotta panel and
Sure.
What family of grid of glass this lives in. It seems to be a tweener at the moment. So I think it could be more about what's on the Joslin side of the street coming across, or however that's worked through. But I do believe staff could deal with that. I think the bigger question is really Shauna's question about projecting over the public way with the other bridge.
Yeah, let's look at the other bridge now. And I'll just start, and by all means, Shauna and Kirk jump in. I definitely think we talked about planting strategies that might be looked at so that it doesn't seem so tight of a planting zone. We talked about needing to maintain the benches at the walkway underneath, but is there something that doesn't change the width of the sidewalk or make it just seem like it's not fully considered? I think the porosity of that lower panel Bill raised as a topic to look at. And then I'll just throw in, is there a way to make this seem more arcade-like?
I agree with all those points, Mimi. And I, and then the other one, of course, is the more I don't even know how to frame the word, but the more the larger issue of the temporariness of the project, and that I think all of those, I don't know how others feel about it, but I think I agree with all of the comments that you made as a summary, Mimi. I think personally, I think those could also be worked through with staff. I think it probably the question of the potential temporariness of the project is also something that might be the complexities of that might be worked through best with staff rather than from our commission.
I agree. I will say, whenever you do come back to full commission, I would really appreciate you walking the full commission through the evolution of this piece, because I do think it's a hard element to digest, but understanding the process and the iterations, I think will be really helpful.
Okay. We understand.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. And then to the building, I think I feel like we have very little comments on this. I think the direction is moving in a positive, direction. We feel good about the glass. I will say there's some comments that were raised on Pilgrim Road about the coloration of the garage doors.
Mm-hmm.
And then the comment on the pedal. And if you go to that back elevation, there's an axon diagram that you have of that back elevation. And you see where you have that vertical window right there. I almost feel like that's where the pedal could end, and you could wrap it around and it would be really complete. And it would actually even benefit the rear elevation where you don't have this awkward little slot there. So just throwing that out as a last attempt to convince you all. And I know it's a dollar balloting.
But it is, I think I completely agree with Mimi on that. because there's a real conflict between sort of an asymmetric, organic, elegant facade, and then we have something that's very, very static when we get to the pilgrim facade. So I think Mimi's suggestion is an extremely, extremely good one.
I agree.
If that can be possible.
Yeah, I think it's consistent with the way you've treated the pedal on Brookline Ave as well. I mean, it peels up to accommodate functionality, whether it's a bridge or a door or whatever. And here, it just goes away. So I think it'd be worth revisiting that.
Any other comments that were raised regarding the building? Shauna or Kirk? I think we.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think there are those views that we don't really get to see because they're buried. I think staff should continue to work through the fact that the building is four-sided, not three, and that look a little further into what is visible of this from the Jamaica Way, the Riverway, Hero Park. I mean, it's impossible to show all the views without a fly-through, but I think you get the idea. I want to address all facades, not three.
Yeah, I do like the idea of standing. I think the CVS is on the right-hand side of the street, but seeing it more oblique rather than just straight up Brookline Ave might be a nice view to add.
Sure.
Okay,
So with those
commissioners.
comments- Yeah.
Kirk, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, with those comments, I would make a motion that this be brought back to the full commission for review. I guess, I mean, if I'm wrong on the process, it was
No.
articulated. I think that was it, but if you want to clarify.
Yeah, I don't know that we have to make a motion, but we all have to agree. And I think I'm happy to support that. I think, I think it's ready to go back to the full commission, given the comments that we just went through are addressed.
Agreed.
So you are right. No formal vote is needed, but I'm hearing a vote of acclamation here for moving this to or recommend for final consideration and a vote of recommendation back at full committee with some very clear direction from the commissioners on each of the connectors and the building articulation that I wrote copious notes of. And there's no formal provisos as this is subcommittee, but we've got this and we'll be working with the proponent on each of these items before bringing it back to you for full commission.
Excellent.
So with that, I'd like to thank the proponent, the public, and of course the commissioners for your time and counsel as always. I hope everybody has a great evening, and looks like the fog has rolled into not quite the snowy view that we saw of the Joslin Park today, but another common occurrence, at least down by the harbor here, as we got sucked in by fog. So hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you. All right.
Thank you very
Good
much.
Good night,
evening.
everyone.
Good seeing
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Take care.